So I'm Jo from Specialist Language Courses. Hello from the UK, sunny Brighton. And today I'm going to talk to you, as Rebecca said, about the importance of listening. Listening to your patients, which I consider to be an essential skill for communication from day one in your jobs. So I'm going to look on how it can really help you with your clinical communication, and specifically the clinical communication criteria in OET. So first of all, let's have a little look at why is it important to listen. So we listen, and what we hear guides our response. We then respond to our patient, and our response can be used to find out more information, and we listen again. So it's like a cycle of listen and respond, listen and respond. And this is essential in a healthcare setting. So I'll explain a little bit more about what I mean by this. So if you have a look at the next slide, imagine you've just listened to a patient who's a bit worried, and she says, I'm really worried about the surgery. And we might respond, it's understandable. Is there anything particular that's worrying you? And then we need to find out more information, and we listen again. And they might say, I'm worried about the general anesthetic. I'm just terrified that I won't wake up again. And so we need to respond to this concern. So we might say, oh, I can see that you're worried. Let me just explain a little bit more about it. So backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. So we'll look now at how it can be used for OET speaking, and specifically the clinical communication criteria. So it's useful for all aspects of the speaking. Obviously, we have to listen, but I'm going to look at 4 particular areas. So why should we listen? We should listen because it helps us with relationship building, exploring the patient's ideas, concerns, and expectations, information gathering, and information giving. So let's take a look at relationship building first. So for relationship building, we need to listen to show the right kind of empathy. Okay, many times I have candidates and students preparing for OET, and they just use the same phrase again and again and again. But it's not always appropriate to say, I understand you're worried, because perhaps they're not worried, perhaps it's something else. So we really need to listen to what our patients are saying so we can respond with the right kind of empathy. I'll show you what I mean by this. So imagine your patient says this, I woke up and I was struggling to catch my breath. I just couldn't breathe. I thought I was going to die. You know, here they're clearly worried. They're scared. They've had a really scary experience. So if you look at the first response, where the healthcare professional said, I understand your concerns. That must have been frustrating. Well, they've not really listened to what the patient said. There's no indication that they're frustrated. It's more that they're scared. They've had, you know, a really frightening experience. So the second response would be more appropriate. Oh, that must have been very scary for you. And just by telling your patient that I hear you and I understand is really good for relationship building, to build a rapport with your patient. Let's look at another example. So here we've got a patient who's perhaps been stuck at hospital for a long time, and they're a bit frustrated and they want to go home. And they say, I've been here for hours. I don't want to stay any longer. I just want to go home. The first response here in red, I understand you're worried, but I can reassure you that everything will be fine. So here they've not really listened to what the patient said. There's no indication that they're worried. And there's no indication that they need reassurance. They're frustrated, perhaps a little bit annoyed because they've been stuck at hospital and they want to go home. So the second response, which is, I know and I understand that it's frustrating having to wait so long, but it's really important that we wait for the test results before you go home. It's much more appropriate, and it really demonstrates that you've listened to your patient. You're saying, you know, I know it's frustrating, I appreciate that, and then stressing the importance of staying a little bit longer. So if we show empathy before we give advice or stress that something's important, we're more likely to get the patient on side and agree to what we're advising. Okay, so we're going to do a little poll now. So we have 3 options, A, B, C. What I'd like you to do is choose the option with the most appropriate response for this patient who's saying, I'm really worried it might be something more serious. So if we could launch the poll now and choose which one you think is the most appropriate response. Okay, we're getting lots of different answers. I can see the majority are going for one particular one. Okay, great. Yeah, so the majority of you have gone for C. Yes, I can see that you're worried. I would agree with that. I think that's the most appropriate response for this particular patient concern. They said that they're worried, and the doctor or nurse has responded, yes, I can see that you're worried. So telling them that they understand and demonstrating that empathy really helps with building a relationship. B is not really demonstrating that you've listened to your patient. It's almost ignoring them and saying, okay, do you mind if I ask you a few more questions, and going on to the next task in the roll card, perhaps. You know, and this is something that I see quite a lot when people are beginning their OET preparation. They're so concerned with going through the task on the roll card that they forget to listen to the patient and respond. A is not a terrible response, it's okay, but I don't think it's the best one of the 3. If someone's really, really worried, just telling them, we'll try not to, is perhaps not the most helpful, but it's okay. But I think definitely C is the most appropriate. Okay, let's move on to exploring ideas, concerns, and expectations. This is something that I find candidates struggle to do in a natural way, why do we need to do it? I mean, we need to listen so that we can find out what's worrying the patient, or, you know, if they have any ideas about what's wrong with them or what they want to get out of the consultation. And we need to listen and pick up on patient cues. Okay, so this is any indications as to how they're feeling. And we need to do this so that we can find out what's specifically concerning them and respond to it. And that way they get the information that they want or need, and they perhaps feel more reassured. So we're going to look at how a nurse does this quite effectively, an example, so we can find out how do we know how our patients are feeling. So we're going to listen to an extract from a consultation between a nurse and the mother of a young child with eczema, and they're discussing how she manages her child's eczema. So I'd just like you just to listen and see if you can find out or think about how is the mother feeling. So if we could play the audio now. Does your son have any medication prescribed for his eczema?
Well, he was prescribed a steroid cream, but I don't use it.
Okay, is there any reason why?
Well, I don't really feel comfortable using it. I have read online that it's not good to use on the child.
Okay, is there anything that particularly concerns you about the steroid cream?
Well, I read that steroids are addictive and can cause long-term problems, so I don't want to risk it.
I see. Well, it's understandable that you're worried, but let me reassure you that it's a very small dose of steroids and applied only to the skin.
I'm not sure.
I understand you're hesitant, but I can assure you that it's very safe to use. It's been prescribed specifically for your son's eczema, and it's really... Okay, thanks. Okay, so another poll. How is the mother feeling? So here you've got 3 options: A, annoyed, B, concerned, or C, judged. So when the poll comes up, choose which option best describes how the mother is feeling based on what you heard. So here comes the poll. Great. Most of you going for one particular feeling. Okay, so yes, thank you very much. So the majority are going for concerned, which I agree with too. They're clearly concerned about, excuse me, she's clearly concerned about using the steroid cream. There's not really an indication that she feels judged about how she's managing her child's eczema or even particularly annoyed. She's clearly concerned. And let's look at how the nurse picks up on this, and let's look at where the mother indicates that her concern. So if you look at the next slide, what we've got in yellow is where the patient or the mother of the patient is showing her concern. So, you know, I've got this, but I don't use it. I don't feel comfortable using it. And it's like, well, I don't want to risk it. So here the nurse in blue at the top two, she's really exploring why so that she can relate her explanation to these concerns. And she does. She tries to reassure the mother, and then the mother goes, I'm not sure. So even just a really short noise and I'm not sure can indicate how they're feeling, and you need to respond to this. So really listen out for those indications to how they're feeling, and don't be too concerned with just moving on to the next task. Really respond to how they're feeling. So for exploring ideas, concerns, and expectations, so we do this, we ask questions and we listen so that we can know their concerns, and we pick up on their verbal and non-verbal hints so that we can respond appropriately and relate our advice back to what they've said. So really addressing their concerns and their ideas and expectations. Okay, moving on to information gathering. This is obviously one where you need to listen quite carefully because we're finding out information that we need. So we need to listen and show that we're listening, and this encourages the patient to continue and facilitates what they're explaining to us. So even simple noises like, I see, okay, can help them, encourage them to continue, especially if they're worried or feeling a bit nervous about what they're saying. We can also listen and summarize to check that we've heard the information correctly. For example, so you said it's only on the left side, is that correct? And we should not be afraid to clarify anything that's vague or that we haven't heard properly. So we might say, you know, could you tell me what you mean by feeling funny? Or simply asking them to repeat what they've said. You know, sorry, can you repeat that? I didn't quite catch that. You know, this is absolutely essential in a healthcare setting because we really need to find the correct information, you know, because if we don't have the right information, it might lead to the patient not getting the right treatment, and it could actually be dangerous as well. And finally, information giving. So we really need to listen to what the patient's saying to find out what they already know. I mean, information giving is where you're giving the information to the patient, but you still need to listen to find out what information to give. We also need to pause a lot and listen to what they're saying, as this is going to tell us how to proceed with our response. So this ensures that you give them with the right kind of information, so the information that they need to know or that they want to know. And I'll just show you a brief example of this in very simple terms. So imagine we're meeting a patient who's just been diagnosed with eczema or their child has, and we find out what they already know. And they might respond, I know nothing. And in this case, we'd say, okay, that's fine. Let me explain a little bit more. However, it could go the other way. They might know a little bit or a lot about it. And in that case, we need to confirm what's correct or perhaps what's incorrect, and then signal that we're going to explain a little bit more. So why develop the skill of listening? Well, it's essential for clinical communication, not only for the OET exam, but for real life patients. You know, and developing these skills will really, really help you with your future career. I truly believe, and feedback that I've got from previous students is you can use these skills from day one in your job. You know, it's really, really important for interaction, for communication, and for better treating your patients. There is a handout that I think is available to download, which has all the information from these slides, so feel free to download and keep that. So thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to Steve now, who's going to carry on.